He built her a beautiful crib by hand for free. He never asked for a thing. He never knew she was the wife of a billionaire. And he certainly never imagined the devastating reason she had secretly sought him out. Meet Leo, a single father and carpenter who builds custom cribs in his garage workshop. And meet Clara, the quietly desperate pregnant woman who walked into his life. This is the story of an act of pure kindness, a hidden fortune, and a secret so painful it would connect two strangers in a way neither could have foreseen. But why would a woman with limitless resources seek out a struggling craftsman for a handmade gift? Every morning at 5:30, Leo Dawson wakes up in a modest two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Portland. The first sound isn't an alarm. It's the quiet hum of a baby monitor from his daughter Maya's room. She's 6. He makes breakfast, packs her lunch, and drops her at school before heading to his real office, a converted garage filled with the scent of cedar and pine. Here, Leo builds cribs, not the mass-produced kind from big box stores, but heirloom pieces carved from solid wood, sanded until they're smooth as silk. He's a single father, a former construction foreman who turned to fine woodworking after the industry crashed. Money is tight. The math is simple. One custom crib pays his mortgage for a month, but Leo has a rule posted on a handwritten note above his workbench. It says, if you need it, you pay what you can. If you can't, you pay nothing. Last year, he built 3 cribs for free. Across town, in a hillside mansion overlooking the city, Clara Thorne stared at a room that cost more than Leo's house. The nursery was a masterpiece of interior design, filled with imported furniture and hand-painted murals. Every item was perfect, and every item felt utterly hollow. Clara was 32 weeks pregnant. Her husband, Robert Thorne, was a tech billionaire, a man whose name was on buildings and whose face was in magazines. Their life was a curated exhibit of success. But in that pristine nursery, Clara felt a chilling dread. She had experienced loss before, a miscarriage at 20 weeks 2 years prior. The grief had been a private, silent earthquake in a world that expected her to be perfect. This new pregnancy was shrouded in anxiety, superstition perhaps. She became convinced that filling the nursery with cold, expensive things was a kind of jinx. She needed something made with intention, something with a soul. She began searching online late at night, terms like handmade crib and local carpenter. She found Leo's website, Dawson Woodcraft. The gallery showed beautiful, simple cribs, but it was the community projects tab that stopped her. Photos of Leo handing a finished crib to a tearful young mother at a women's shelter. The caption read, paid for by the last 3 clients, pass it on. Clara didn't contact him through the website. She didn't use her real name. She created a simple email address and wrote as Clara, a pregnant woman feeling overwhelmed. She asked if he took special requests. Leo wrote back the same day. He said he did. Their meeting was at a public park, not his workshop. Clara arrived alone, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her auburn hair pulled back. She looked like any other expectant mother. Leo arrived with Maya in tow, holding her hand. He was kind, patient. He asked about her vision. Clara spoke of safety, of stability, of a feeling of peace. She asked for a crib built from oak with a simple, rocking base. She never mentioned the mansion. She never mentioned the fortune. She said she and her husband were saving up, that they could pay in installments. Leo listened, then shook his head. He saw the faint tremor in her hands, the careful way she spoke about the baby's future. He made his decision on the spot. There's no charge, he said. Clara was stunned. She insisted. Leo was firm. My daughter, he said, nodding to Maya on the swings. We had a rough start. People helped us. This is me passing it on. Just promise me one thing. Anything, Clara whispered. Send me a picture when the baby's sleeping in it. For Leo, it was another project. For Clara, it was a lifeline. She visited his workshop twice to see the progress. She watched his large, scarred hands move with precise gentleness over the wood. She saw the photos of Maya pinned to his wall, the unpaid bills next to his calculator, the quiet dignity of his struggle. She felt like a fraud with every visit, but she was desperate for the connection to this tangible act of creation. Meanwhile, Leo simply saw a client who needed help. He invested not just time, but materials he couldn't easily replace. He chose the finest oak plank he had been saving for a special commission. He worked late into the nights after putting Maya to bed. The crib was finished 3 weeks later. It was stunning. A simple, solid, beautiful piece of craftsmanship. Clara came to pick it up. When she saw it, she began to cry. Not delicate tears, but deep, heaving sobs that seemed to come from a place Leo instinctively recognized: grief. He thought it was joy. He helped her load the crib into the back of her modest rented sedan, never questioning why a woman who could pay in installments didn't own a larger car. He waved goodbye, a small check for materials she'd secretly tucked under his coffee maker, already found and set aside to donate. He felt the warm glow of a good deed done. He had no idea that the woman driving away was married to one of the richest men in the state, and he had absolutely no clue that her husband, Robert Thorne, had just discovered his wife's secret project. And Robert was not happy. In fact, he was already deploying private security to find out exactly who this Carpenter was, and why his wife was so emotionally invested in him. Robert Thorne's security team delivered a 12-page dossier on Leo Dawson within 48 hours. It contained everything: his address, his financial records, his daughter's school, even the details of his wife's death from ovarian cancer 4 years prior. Robert sat in his study, a glass-walled room overlooking the city, and read it with cold, clinical detachment. He saw a man living on the edge of poverty, a man who gave away his work. He didn't see generosity, he saw a calculation. In Robert's world, nobody did anything for nothing. This Carpenter was either a con artist preying on his wife's emotional state, or something worse. He ordered continuous surveillance. Meanwhile, Leo was oblivious. He was focused on his next commission, a simple bookshelf, and on Maya's upcoming parent-teacher conference. The first sign something was wrong was subtle. A dark sedan parked down the street from his house for 2 consecutive nights. Leo, a former foreman used to job site theft, noticed. He wrote down the license plate. Then his website went down. His hosting provider sent a vague email about terms of service violations. His Instagram account for Dawson Woodcraft, his main source of clients, was suddenly disabled. Appeals went into a void. Leo's phone stopped ringing. The stream of inquiries dried up overnight. He was in his workshop, frustrated, trying to fix his website on an old laptop when the first stranger arrived. A man in a sleek suit, driving a car worth more than Leo's life insurance policy, knocked on the garage door. He introduced himself as Mr. Alden, a representative of concerned parties. He was polite, unnervingly so. He offered Leo a cashier's check for $25,000. The condition: Leo was to sign a non-disclosure agreement stating he had never met Clara Thorne and to cease all contact immediately. Leo stared at the check, then at the man. "Is this a joke?" The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's a solution, Mr. Dawson, a generous one. Take the money, improve your circumstances, and forget this ever happened." Leo felt a hot rush of anger. This wasn't about a crib anymore. This was about being bought off, being erased. He thought of Clara's tears, her palpable fear. He pushed the check back. "Tell your concerned parties the crib was a gift. Gifts don't have receipts, and I don't take hush money." Mr. Alden's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, the kind of mistake that can have consequences for a small business, for a family." The threat was clear. As the man left, Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He went inside and pulled Maya close, a fear he hadn't felt since his wife's diagnosis settling in his bones. Clara, heavy with pregnancy, was a prisoner in her own home. Robert had calmly, methodically cut her off. He canceled her credit cards, citing security concerns. Her personal email was now monitored. The household staff, loyal to Robert, reported her movements. When she confronted him, his anger was icy. "You've been emotionally compromised, Clara. You formed an attachment to a stranger and you lied to me. I'm protecting our family from a potential scandal." He showed her photos of Leo leaving Maya's school. "See, he's a single father, struggling. What do you think he really wants from you?" Clara was horrified. "He doesn't even know who I am." "Exactly," Robert said, and he never will. But Clara had one secret Robert hadn't uncovered. A prepaid phone bought months ago during a moment of paranoid planning. She waited until Robert left for a board meeting. Locked in the pristine nursery, sitting on the floor beside the oak crib, she made a call. It wasn't to Leo. It was to her older sister, Elise, a family law attorney in another state. Through choked sobs, she told her everything. The crib, the carpenter, the surveillance, the control. Elise listened, her voice turning grave. Clara, this isn't about a crib. This is about isolation. He's building a paper trail to question your stability. With your history of grief, she didn't need to finish. Clara felt the world tilt. The nursery walls seemed to close in. The beautiful crib now felt like a piece of evidence in a case she didn't know was being built against her. The next escalation was economic. Leo arrived at his bank to deposit a small check from his last completed job. The teller looked uncomfortable and called the manager. Leo's business line of credit, a small $8,000 buffer he used for materials, had been revoked. No explanation. Then, a letter arrived from the city. A complaint had been filed about unpermitted commercial activity in a residential garage. He was ordered to cease operations pending an inspection. The complaint was anonymous. Leo stood in his silent workshop, the city notice in his hand, and realized he was being dismantled piece by piece. He thought of the check for $25,000. This was the consequence the man in the suit had promised. He was being punished for refusing the bribe. Desperate, Leo did the only thing he could think of. He drove to the women's shelter where he donated the crib, the one in the photo on his website. He asked to speak to the director, a no-nonsense woman named Gloria. He showed her the city notice, the screenshot of his down website. "I think it's because of a client, a woman named Clara. Do you know her?" Gloria's eyes widened. She led him to a private office. "Leo, the woman who came with you that day to deliver the crib. She wasn't just a volunteer, she's a major donor. She funds almost half of this shelter's operating budget, but she does it all anonymously under a trust name." Leo felt the floor drop away. "What's her real name?" Gloria looked pained. "I can't tell you that, confidentiality, but if you're tangled up with her, you're tangled up with serious money, and money like that doesn't play fair." Leo drove home in a daze. The pieces snapped together. The modest car was a rental. The fear wasn't just about money. The husband wasn't just suspicious. He was powerful enough to erase a man's livelihood with a few phone calls. That night, as he read Maya a bedtime story, his mind raced. He was a carpenter, not a fighter. But this was his daughter's home, his business, his life. He couldn't just let it be taken. The breaking point came from an unexpected direction. A local news van pulled up outside Leo's house. A reporter, tipped off by an anonymous source, wanted to do a story about the city cracking down on small home businesses. Leo, wary, agreed to talk, thinking it might help his case with the permit. He spoke about his work, his rule of free cribs, the importance of community. He did not mention Clara. The segment aired at 6 o'clock. In the Thornes mansion, Robert Thorne watched it on a large screen, his face a mask of fury. The story was sympathetic, painting Leo as a hardworking single father persecuted by bureaucracy. The phone rang. It was his public relations chief. "Robert, we have a problem. The story's gaining traction online. The narrative is bad for us. It looks like the big, faceless system crushing the little guy." Robert snapped, "Handle it." His PR chief was quiet for a moment. "The best way to handle it is to become the solution, not the problem." An idea, cold and brilliant, formed in Robert's mind. If he couldn't bury Leo, he would co-opt him. He would turn the carpenter's virtue into a marketing tool. The next morning, Leo received a formal letter on thick, embossed stationery. It was an offer from the Thorne Family Foundation. They wished to partner with him to launch a nationwide Cribs for Families in Need initiative. They would fund the materials, provide a state-of-the-art workshop, and feature Leo as the heartwarming face of the campaign. The offer was for $250,000 a year. The catch was in Clause 7. Leo would sign over the rights to his business name and his life story for use in promotional materials. He would become an employee of the foundation. And he would, of course, sign a comprehensive NDA about any and all prior interactions with any member of the Thorne family. It was a cage made of gold, a way to silence him permanently and make his integrity a profit center for the man trying to destroy him. Leo read the letter, then read it again. He thought of Maya's future, of the security he could never provide. He thought of the families he could help with that kind of funding. The temptation was a physical ache. He picked up the phone to call the number on the letterhead, his hand shaking. But before he could dial, his doorbell rang. He opened the door to find Clara Thorne standing on his porch, pale and trembling, her eyes wide with panic. She was holding a single, small suitcase, and she said 5 words that changed everything. "He's taking the baby, Leo." Leo pulled Clara inside and closed the door, the foundation of his quiet life cracking under the weight of her words. She was shivering, though the night was warm. In his small living room, under the glow of a single lamp, the story spilled out. Robert had assembled a team of high-priced attorneys and a psychiatrist. They were petitioning the court for an emergency custody order the moment the baby was born, citing Clara, documented pattern of irrational behavior and secretive attachments. The crib and her relationship with Leo was Exhibit A. Her previous miscarriage was being framed not as a tragedy, but as a potential psychological break. "He says I'm a risk to the child," Clara whispered, her hands cradling her belly. "He's going to have me committed for evaluation unless I sign over custodial rights to him and his mother." Leo felt a cold fury settle in his chest. This wasn't just control, it was annihilation. He made a pot of tea, his mind working like it did when solving a complex joinery problem. He needed a lawyer, but Clara had no access to funds and Leo's savings were a few $100s. Then he remembered the card Gloria from the shelter had given him. He called her. Gloria listened, her voice turning steely. "I know a lawyer. Her name is Mara Sylvia. She's a shark in family court and she hates bullies with money. She'll take this on contingency for the press alone." Within an hour, Mara Sylvia was on a video call from her home office. She was in her 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense energy. "Okay, folks, we're going to war, and we're going to lose unless we change the battlefield." Mara's strategy was not to defend, but to attack. She explained that fighting Robert's custody claim directly was a losing proposition. He could outspend and outlast them. Instead, they had to undermine the foundation of his claim, his own fitness. "We need to prove his actions are about control, not care, and we need to do it before the baby comes." She had Clara sign a retainer agreement and immediately filed a counterpetition alleging coercive control and financial abuse, requesting a restraining order and the freezing of marital assets to allow Clara legal resources. It was a bold, public move designed to force Robert into the light. Robert's response was swift and brutal. The next morning, a process server delivered a new lawsuit, this one naming Leo Dawson personally. It alleged intentional interference with a marriage, emotional distress, and fraudulent business practices. The demanded damages were $3 million. The local news, which had been sympathetic, now ran a follow-up story. Carpenter in middle of billionaire custody battle. The comments section filled with speculation. Was Leo a gold digger? A manipulator? The positive narrative was crumbling. Then the second wave hit. A detailed anonymous post appeared on a local gossip forum. It claimed Leo's wife hadn't died from cancer, but from complications due to a failed, unproven medical treatment he had pushed her to try. It was a monstrous lie, but it was out there. Maya came home from school that day, her little face drawn. A parent had told their child that Leo's workshop was being shut down because he hurt people. Leo held his daughter, his rage a silent, burning thing. He was being erased, and his daughter's world was being poisoned. Mara Sylvia worked through the night. She had a contact in financial investigations. She was looking for leverage, anything to force a settlement. What she found was bigger than leverage. Her contact dug into the shell companies that funded Robert's venture capital firm. Buried in the records of a biotech startup Robert had acquired and shut down was a familiar name, Elinor Dawson, Leo's late wife. She had been a participant in a Phase 2 clinical trial for a novel ovarian cancer drug. The The trial had been terminated early due to lack of efficacy. The startup's assets, including the trial data, were sold for parts to a larger pharmaceutical company. The founder of that startup was now a senior executive at Robert's flagship company. Mara presented the documents to Leo and Clara in a quiet corner of a public library. Leo stared at his wife's anonymized patient ID number, a string of digits he vaguely remembered from insurance forms. "What does this mean?" Mara's voice was low. "It means Robert Thorne's company profited from a failed drug trial your wife was in. It doesn't mean he knew her, but it establishes a connection. A horrific, painful connection. It turns his narrative about you being a random threat completely on its head." Clara turned ashen. "He knew," she breathed, "when your website went down. When I told him about the kind Carpenter named Leo, he ran a background check. He would have seen her name. He knew who you were from the very beginning." The room tilted. Robert's campaign against Leo wasn't just about erasing a stranger. It was about burying a living reminder of a corporate sin. Leo's free crib wasn't just an emotional threat. It was a thread that could pull on a tapestry Robert needed to keep hidden. This was the wait it gets worse moment. The personal had just become profoundly, tragically institutional. Leo wasn't just a carpenter who helped the wrong woman. He was a ghost from Robert Thorne's balance sheet, given flesh and a child to protect. The stakes were no longer just about a baby, custody, or a small business. They were about the cost of doing business, measured in human lives. Armed with this, Mara went on the offensive. She didn't file the documents. Instead, she requested an emergency hearing on the restraining order and invited Robert's legal team to a private conference. In that room, she laid out the timeline. Clara's search for a crib, Leo's identity, the terminated drug trial she didn't accuse. She simply connected the dots and asked one question. What will a jury think when they learn that my client's husband is trying to destroy a man whose wife died in one of his company's failed experiments? It was a nuclear option. Robert's lead attorney, a calm, older man, didn't flinch, but he asked for a recess. The call came to Mara's phone 2 hours later. It was Robert himself, his voice stripped of its usual polished charm, tight with controlled fury. He demanded Clara return home immediately and drop all petitions. In return, he would drop the lawsuits against Leo and reconsider the custody approach. It was not a surrender, it was a tactical retreat. Clara refused. She told Mara to tell him the only deal was a full, public withdrawal of the custody case and the unfreezing of her assets. The standoff was absolute. That night, at 38 weeks pregnant, Clara's water broke. The stress had sent her into labor. Leo drove her to the hospital, running red lights, his knuckles white on the wheel. Mara met them there, already on the phone with a judge to get an emergency order preventing Robert from barring Clara from her own delivery room. But when they arrived, Robert was already in the lobby, surrounded by 2 lawyers and a man in a suit who was likely the psychiatrist. Security guards flanked him. He had a court order of his own, signed by a judge in a different county, granting him temporary medical decision-making authority for his incapacitated wife. The 2 factions faced each other under the fluorescent lights of the maternity ward lobby. Clara, clutching Leo's arm, began to cry in pain and terror. Robert's expression was one of cold victory. He motioned for a nurse to take Clara. "My wife needs care. This man is not family. Remove him." The security guard stepped forward. Leo stood his ground, a solitary figure in a flannel shirt against an army of suits. He was about to speak, to fight, when the glass doors of the hospital hissed open behind him. And a dozen people walked in. Gloria from the shelter, 2 young mothers with toddlers in strollers holding photos of the cribs Leo had built for them. The local reporter, her phone recording, and 4 other men and women, strangers to Leo but not to Clara. They were staff from the other charities she had anonymously funded over the years who had seen the news and connected the dots. They formed a silent, determined line beside Leo. No one spoke. They just stood. The head of hospital security, overwhelmed, called his superior. The moment hung in the balance, a single, fragile heartbeat away from chaos. And in that charged silence, as Clara's contractions grew closer, Leo Dawson looked at the billionaire who had tried to erase him and realized the game had just changed forever. The standoff in the hospital lobby lasted less than 60 seconds, but it broke the spell of Robert Thorne's absolute authority. The head of hospital security, a pragmatic man named Lewis, took one look at the growing crowd, the recording reporter, and the woman in active labor and made a decision. "Sir," he said to Robert, his voice firm, "your wife is going to the delivery room now. She can have 2 support persons. You decide who here, or I will." Robert's lawyers whispered furiously in his ear. The optics of a physical altercation were catastrophic. Robert's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Clara," he said, his voice icy, "choose." Clara, leaning on Leo, didn't hesitate. "Leo, and my sister." She pointed to Elise, who had just burst through the doors, having caught the first flight out. Robert was excluded from his own child's birth. It was a profound, public humiliation. As Clara was wheeled away, she looked back at Leo, her eyes holding a mixture of fear and fierce determination. The battle for the baby had begun. In the delivery room, Clara's labor was swift and intense. Leo, true to his nature, was a calm, steady presence. He didn't pretend to be a medical expert, he was just a rock in the storm. He held Clara's hand, reminded her to breathe, and when the moment came, he was there bearing witness as a beautiful, healthy baby boy entered the world. They named him Samuel. Clara, exhausted and radiant, looked from her son to Leo. "He has a safe place to sleep because of you," she whispered. It was the first true moment of peace any of them had felt in months. But downstairs, the war continued. Mara Sylvia was in the hospital chapel, now functioning as a makeshift war room, on a conference call with a judge. She presented the emergency petition, the evidence of coercive control, and the explosive connection to the failed drug trial. The judge, a woman named Helen Wright, listened. She was known for being no-nonsense and deeply skeptical of power. She issued a series of blistering orders. The temporary order granting Robert medical authority was vacated immediately. A mutual temporary restraining order was put in place, barring Robert from contacting Clara or Leo directly. Most importantly, she froze a significant portion of the marital assets in a separate account for Clara's exclusive use for legal and living expenses, pending a full hearing. It was a staggering legal defeat for Robert. The story exploded. The local news piece went national. The narrative was irresistible, the billionaire versus the carpenter, with a newborn baby at the center. But this time, the details were different. The story of Alina Dawson and the drug trial leaked, not from Mara's team directly, but through the investigative reporter who had been present. Robert Thorne's company faced a sudden wave of scrutinizing headlines. Did a tech billionaire bury a failed cancer trial? A crib, a custody battle, and a corporate secret. His stock price dipped. His board grew nervous. Robert, isolated and facing a public relations inferno, had no good moves left. Fighting the custody case would mean discovery, depositions, and the drug trial story becoming official court record. It would be a drawn-out, bloody spectacle with no guarantee of victory. Mara Sylvia knew this. She sent him a proposed settlement. Its terms were stark. Robert would withdraw his custody petition with prejudice, meaning he could never file it again. He would agree to an uncontested divorce with a generous, predetermined settlement for Clara and Samuel. He would drop all lawsuits against Leo Dawson, and he would make a publicly announced 7-figure donation to ovarian cancer research in Alina Dawson's name. In return, Clara would agree to a standard, non-disparagement clause, and the details of the drug trial would remain a private matter. It took Robert Thorne 72 hours to sign. The press release was dry and corporate. It spoke of a mutual decision to focus on the well-being of their child and an endowment to a worthy cause. But everyone who had been in that hospital lobby knew the truth. The fortress of money and power had been breached, not by a bigger force, but by a stubborn kindness that refused to be bought or buried. In the weeks that followed, life reshaped itself. Clara and Samuel moved into a comfortable house not far from the city. Her divorce settlement gave her freedom and security. The first thing she did with her newly accessible funds was not for herself. She called Leo. She offered to buy him a new workshop outright. He refused. She offered to fund a nonprofit with him as the director. He hesitated. Then she proposed the idea that worked. She would provide a zero-interest, forgivable loan to clear his debts and expand his current garage into a proper, permitted workshop. The loan would be forgiven for every crib he built for a family in need. It was a partnership, not a patronage. Leo agreed. Leo's business came back stronger than ever. The national publicity, though born from conflict, brought him a flood of commissions from people who valued his story and his craftsmanship. He hired an assistant, a young single mother who needed flexible work. He reopened his website, and the first image was of the oak crib he'd built for Clara, with a sleeping Samuel nestled inside, just as he'd asked. The caption read, "Sometimes the most important things we build aren't made of wood." Clara and Leo forged an unlikely, enduring friendship. She became a regular visitor at his home, often with Samuel in tow. Maya adored the baby. Leah found in Clara a kindred spirit who understood loss and the fight for a fresh start. They never spoke of Robert. Their bond was built on the rubble he had tried to create between them. The final surprise came a year later on the anniversary of Samuel's birth. Clara invited Leo to the dedication of the Eleanor Dawson Center for Maternal and Infant Health, a wing she had fully funded at the city hospital. It provided support, supplies, and counseling for low-income expectant mothers. At the ceremony, Clara gave a speech. She spoke of fear, of kindness, and of the invisible threads that connect us. She did not mention Leo by name. She didn't need to. Then she presented him with a small, polished box. Inside, on a bed of velvet, was a single, perfect dovetail joint, carved from the same oak as Samuel's crib. A note read, "The joint that holds everything together. Thank you for being ours." Leo stood under the bright lights, the carpenter in a room full of doctors and donors, holding a piece of wood that meant more than any metal. He had set out to build a crib for a stranger. In the end, he had helped build a new life for a mother and her son, secured a future for his own daughter, and honored the memory of his wife in a way he never could have imagined. The devastating reason Clara had sought him out, her grief, her isolation, her premonition of loss, had led not to ruin but to a profound and unexpected redemption. The story was over, but the work, the good work, was just beginning. So what is this story really? Is it a tale about a billionaire's wife? Or a carpenter's kindness? It's both, and it's more. It's a map of the invisible threads that connect us, threads that wealth can't sever and hardship can't break. We live in a world designed to keep us in our lanes, the wealthy here, the struggling there, separated by gates and assumptions. But Clara stepped out of her lane, and Leo held the door open. That simple intersection changed everything. We learned that the anonymous donor, the person who gives without any need for credit, isn't just a myth. They exist in the shadows of great fortunes, funding shelters and research, often seeking nothing but the quiet knowledge that they helped. Clara was one of them until her need for a different kind of connection, a human, tangible one, brought her into the light. We also learned that financial stress during pregnancy is a silent, crushing weight for millions, a weight that can be lifted not just by money, but by the profound reassurance that someone sees you and cares. This story asks a lingering question. What are we building? Are we building walls to protect what we have, or are we building bridges, however simple, to reach someone else? Leo built a crib. That was the physical object. But what he really built was a lifeline for Clara, for Samuel, and ultimately for himself. He proved that integrity, when stubbornly held, is its own kind of power, a power that can, against all odds, hold a billionaire to account. The world is full of Leos, people who show up, who do the right thing not for applause, but because it's the only thing they know how to do. And it's full of Claras too, people carrying hidden burdens, seeking a moment of authenticity in a curated life. Their collision wasn't an accident. It was a reminder that our most vulnerable moments are also our most human, and that our greatest strength often lies not in what we own, but in what we're willing to give. Leo still works in his expanded workshop. Maya is learning to sand wood, her hands growing steady. Clara is raising Samuel and she still funds charities, but now she visits them too, her son in her arms, understanding that presence is its own kind of gift. They built more than furniture. They built a testament to the idea that no act of true kindness is ever just a simple gift. It is a seed, and you never know what mighty, beautiful thing might grow from it. If you believe that the smallest connections can unravel the biggest plans, that courage wears a work apron as often as a suit. Subscribe.